My friend has been pushing me to get this all down before I completely move forward, so here I am. Writing isn't really my thing, but I'll give it a shot. 3 years back, I crossed paths with Eden at a gathering my cousin threw. She came with someone we both knew, and honestly, she seemed completely out of reach for someone like me, the type who commands attention the second she enters a space. We connected over some streaming series we'd both been following, though the title escapes me now, and we swapped social media handles. I assumed she was just being polite and wouldn't bother replying when I reached out, but surprisingly, she did. Our initial meetup was pretty ordinary, just grabbing coffee at that trendy spot downtown where everyone goes for their photogenic drinks. My nerves were all over the place, but she appeared genuinely curious about me, asking about my background, my hobbies, things like that. She mentioned working at a dental practice and sharing an apartment with someone in those newer buildings across town. Things progressed rapidly from there. Before 6 months had passed, we were practically cohabiting at my place, a modest 2-bedroom rental I'd had for several years. She'd spend most weeknights there, her belongings scattered throughout, but maintained her own apartment since the rental agreement hadn't concluded. Looking back, that should have raised questions. She never extended invitations to her place, always citing her roommate's discomfort with visitors. My introduction to her mother, Naomi, happened around the 8-month mark. Eden had been strangely evasive about family introductions, but eventually arranged dinner at an upscale restaurant where single dishes cost what I'd typically spend on weekly groceries. The instant Naomi's eyes met mine, I felt like merchandise being evaluated. She posed pointed inquiries about my aspirations and professional trajectory while glancing at my timepiece. Just a standard Timex, nothing elaborate. When Eden excused herself, Naomi leaned forward and directly stated that her daughter had grown accustomed to a particular standard of living that would be difficult for someone in my position to maintain. I chuckled, thinking it was an uncomfortable attempt at humor, but her expression remained stone cold. Eden returned, and the discussion shifted to some tropical getaway they'd taken. I mentioned to Eden afterward that her mother came across as somewhat overbearing. She dismissed it, explaining that Naomi had protective instincts because Eden's father abandoned them financially when she was young. It seemed reasonable, so I didn't pursue it further. Another year passed, and I proposed. Nothing elaborate. I took her to the waterfront where we'd had our third outing. Knelt down with a ring I'd been saving toward for months. She appeared truly elated, snapped countless photos for social media, and immediately contacted her mother, not her friends, her mother, while we were still lakeside. That's when things began shifting strangely. Wedding preparations transformed Eden into someone I barely recognized. Suddenly, everything required premium quality. A venue booked solid for 1.5 years that she mysteriously secured with 4 months' notice. A florist who typically only handles high-profile events in the metropolitan area, somehow available. I kept raising budget concerns, only to have Eden assure me her mother was covering most expenses, so I shouldn't stress. But when deposit deadlines arrived, guess whose payment card got charged? Mine. Every single instance. When I'd inquire about Naomi's financial contributions, Eden would give me this wounded look, as if I'd disrespected her entire lineage, and say something like her mother was orchestrating everything, that was her contribution, or she'd reimburse us later. She never did. My savings vanished. Then my emergency reserves. I even tapped into my property fund, money I'd been accumulating for years to eventually purchase land outside the metropolitan area. I never disclosed that fund to Eden. That detail becomes significant later. The wedding day arrived, and despite everything, I felt genuine excitement. Eden looked stunning in her gown. The venue was admittedly flawless, and even my socially awkward sibling managed to deliver his best man speech without incident. Then came the parental toasts. My mother shared some touching words that got me emotional. Then Naomi rose with her champagne flute, and I swear the atmosphere turned frigid. She began by expressing surprise when Eden introduced me, calling me unconventional compared to Eden's previous partners, noting how Eden had always gravitated toward ambitious individuals, clearly implying I wasn't among them. Guests grew visibly uncomfortable. exchanging awkward glances across tables. Then she delivered the line that's been echoing in my mind for months. This poor boy actually believes he can provide for my daughter. Please, she's just keeping him around until something better materializes. There was this awful silence. Then Eden laughed. Not an uncomfortable laugh, not an embarrassed laugh. A genuine laugh, like her mother had delivered the most hilarious private joke. I looked at Eden, waiting for her to defend me, say anything. But she just kept beaming at her mother with this familiar expression they'd shared before, like they were the only ones privy to some secret. My father partially rose from his seat. He's traditional and doesn't tolerate disrespect, but my mother restrained him. I just sat there, smile plastered on my face, as Naomi concluded with some condescending remark about savoring the experience while it lasted before sitting down. The DJ, bless him, immediately amplified the music and announced our first dance. Eden grabbed my hand as if nothing had occurred and led me to the floor. I was in shock, mechanically moving through our choreographed dance while my mind struggled to process what had just transpired. Eden kept murmuring about how flawless everything was and how delighted she felt, while I nodded robotically. Later that evening, back in our hotel suite, I finally addressed it, asked Eden what her mother meant by that toast. She dismissed it, saying I was overreacting and her mother just had an unconventional sense of humor that sometimes missed the mark. When I questioned why she laughed, she became irritated, claiming she was just attempting to diffuse an awkward situation. I dropped it because it was our wedding night and I didn't want to begin our marriage with conflict. But something had fundamentally changed inside me, a suspicion that hadn't existed before, or perhaps had, but I'd been suppressing it. The honeymoon in Puerto Vallarta felt off. Eden was all affection and cheerfulness when capturing photos for social media, but withdrawn and preoccupied when we were alone. She constantly checked her device, and when I asked who required such frequent communication, she'd become defensive, accusing me of being controlling. We returned home and attempted to establish married life, but that small kernel of doubt continued expanding. Eden immediately started discussing purchasing a home in those exclusive gated developments on the north side where professionals and attorneys reside. When I mentioned we couldn't afford anything there, she said her mother would assist with the initial payment. Same pattern, different situation. About 3 weeks post-wedding, I arrived home unexpectedly due to a water main rupture at the construction site. Eden didn't detect my entrance because she was on the phone in our bedroom. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but when I heard my name, I froze in the corridor. She was speaking with her mother, laughing about how David remains completely oblivious, and how Jacob claims the market is ideal right now, and something about establishing residency first, so the prenuptial agreement becomes irrelevant. Jacob, her ex, the one she dated before me who works in property sales, the one her mother constantly references as representative of Eden's typical type. I quietly retreated down the hall, went outside, then re-entered making considerable noise. When Eden emerged from the bedroom, her phone had vanished and she appeared flustered. That night, sleep eluded me. I kept replaying that conversation, connecting it to Naomi's wedding toast, to all the peculiar little moments that never quite made sense. While Eden slept beside me, I used her thumb to unlock her device. She never changed her security code after I discovered her accessing mine months earlier. What I discovered made me ill. Messages with her mother discussing the plan. Messages with Jacob that were inappropriately familiar for someone supposedly just an ex. Screenshots of my credit report that she'd obtained without my awareness. Research on divorce regulations in our state concerning assets and property. They were manipulating me. Had been from the beginning. The scheme was apparently to leverage my stable earnings and solid credit to secure a mortgage on a desirable house, establish residency, then divorce me for Jacob once the prenuptial timeline lapsed. In our state, whoever remains in the residence during separation typically retains it in the divorce, especially if the other party can't afford to buy them out. I wanted to wake her immediately and confront her, but something held me back. Perhaps it was shock. Perhaps it was the sudden recognition that I'd been cohabiting with a stranger for 3 years. Whatever it was, I decided in that moment to play the extended game. See, what Eden and Naomi didn't know was that I wasn't as financially naive as they assumed. Yes, I'd depleted my visible savings on our wedding, but that property fund I mentioned, it was actually far more than a fund. I'd already purchased 5 acres outside the city limits 3 years before even meeting Eden. Paid completely, deed in my name exclusively. I'd been saving to construct on it eventually, but never mentioned it to her because, well, I suppose some part of me always sensed she wasn't as invested in our future as I was. The following morning, I acted completely normal. Kissed Eden goodbye as she departed for work, then called in sick to my job for the first time in 2 years. I spent the day making calls, first to an attorney to understand my options, then to my friend who manages a construction crew, and finally to my bank to secure my accounts. For the next several weeks, I played the perfect oblivious husband. I agreed enthusiastically when Eden suggested we begin house hunting. I nodded along when she showed me listings far above our price range. I pretended to believe her when she claimed her mother would help financially. Meanwhile, I was setting a plan in motion that would give Eden and Naomi precisely what they deserved: the surprise of their lives. After that wedding reception catastrophe, I existed in a strange mental state. You know that sensation when you're staring at your ceiling fan at 3 in the morning, watching it rotate and questioning how your existence became such chaos? That was me virtually every night after hearing Eden laugh at her mother's speech. I kept maintaining appearances, though. Woke up, made coffee, went to work, came home, watched whatever Eden selected on streaming services, went to bed, repeat, but internally, complete turmoil. Every time Eden messaged someone and smiled at her device, my stomach would knot. Every time she mentioned her mother calling, I'd suddenly need to shower or check something in the garage. One morning, about 2 weeks after that phone conversation I overheard, the one where Eden was discussing Jacob and the mortgage with her mother, Eden left her laptop open when she went to shower. I'm not typically the intrusive type, but her email was right there, and a new message from her mother had just appeared. The subject line read, "Next steps." I shouldn't have looked. But also, I absolutely should have looked. The email was essentially a timeline. 3 months of playing house, her mother's phrasing, not mine. Then begin searching for houses in the appropriate neighborhoods. Translation, places beyond our means. Get pre-approved for a mortgage using my income and credit since Eden's was damaged from maxed-out credit cards her mother had helped conceal from me. Purchase house, establish residency, file for divorce. Retain house because I wouldn't be able to afford the payments alone. There it was, the entire scheme laid out like some perverse project management schedule. And the final blow? The email concluded with, "Jacob says the market in Lakeside Manor is heating up, so we may need to expedite. He's already identified 3 listings perfect for you." Attached. I closed the laptop, made another cup of coffee, and just sat at our kitchen table for approximately an hour. Didn't even realize I was sitting in darkness until Eden came out of the bedroom and asked why I hadn't activated any lights. That's when I decided to become the silent builder. See? I'd always been the type to work through problems verbally. Communication and all that. But what do you do when the person you're supposed to communicate with is literally conspiring against you with their mother? You stay quiet and formulate your own plans. The next day, I contacted my friend Beck, who operates his own small crew. We'd been friends since secondary school, worked together for years before he launched his own venture. I told him I needed assistance with a special project and asked if he could meet me at my land that week. When Saturday arrived, I told Eden I was helping Beck with a bathroom renovation. She barely glanced up from her device, just said something about being careful not to injure my back again. I grabbed my tools and departed. Beck was already at my land when I arrived, sitting on his tailgate, drinking coffee from his battered insulated cup. He took one look at my face and said I looked like garbage. Always had a way with words, that guy. I didn't reveal everything initially, just mentioned Eden and I were experiencing difficulties, and I needed to determine what to do with this property. We walked the land, and I showed him the foundation I'd already laid for what was supposed to be our future home. It was solid work, properly executed. I'd spent weekends perfecting it, imagining Eden and me building a life there. Beck asked the obvious question, was I still constructing the house as planned? That's when I finally told someone the complete ugly truth. The wedding speech, the phone conversation, the emails, the entire scheme. Beck sat on a stack of lumber I had covered with tarps and just stared at me. Then he called Eden something that would definitely get this post deleted if I repeated it, followed by telling me I needed to consult an attorney immediately. He wasn't wrong. Monday morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years and went to see an attorney my father knew. Guy was semi-retired but still maintained a small practice. I explained my situation, showed him the screenshots I'd taken of the email, played the recording of Eden discussing Jacob and the mortgage with her mother. The lawyer, let's call him Bernie, removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes like he was exhausted. Said he'd encountered plenty of divorce cases in his time, but this level of premeditation was something exceptional. Then he asked me what I wanted to do. That was the question, wasn't it? Did I confront Eden? File for divorce immediately? Try to salvage something that was clearly beyond saving? Bernie advised documenting everything, limiting financial exposure, and considering my options carefully. But while leaving his office, what resonated with me was something he said almost as an afterthought. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. That's when the ideas started forming. I returned to my land that evening, sat on my truck tailgate, and looked at that foundation as the sun was setting. This piece of earth was mine, fully paid for before I ever met Eden. The building permits were in my name only, and I knew every contractor, supplier, and inspector within 50 miles. The plan crystallized over the next few days. I'd build something all right, just not what Eden and Naomi were anticipating. I assembled my crew, guys I'd worked with for years who I trusted completely. Told them I had a personal project and needed their help during evenings and weekends. Everyone was in. Even my boss, who'd been like a second father to me since I started working for him at 19, offered to help with materials and equipment. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the clueless husband. I even started going along with Eden's hints about house hunting. Yeah, babe, that neighborhood sounds nice. Sure. I can ask about overtime to boost our down payment savings. Of course, your mom has excellent taste in kitchen countertops. Evenings and weekends. Though I was building what my crew started calling the Spite House. We worked like machines. Got the framing up in record time. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC. All of it installed by guys who owed me favors or were friends willing to help for beer and barbecue. I called in every connection I had for materials. Some left over from other jobs, some at contractor pricing, some outright donated when people heard vague details of my situation. The whole time, Eden was getting bolder with her plans. Started casually mentioning that her mother had a friend in real estate, Jacob, though she never used his name to me. Began leaving mortgage calculators open on her laptop where I'd see them. Even started discussing which of our furniture would look good in a larger place. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. A text from Naomi appeared that just read, "Jacob found the one. Showing tomorrow." I photographed her screen, then set the phone back exactly where it was. Added it to my growing file of evidence. The next day at work, my boss pulled me aside. He'd been helping coordinate deliveries to my land and knew most of what was happening. He asked if I was doing okay, and something about the genuine concern in his voice nearly broke me. I'd been operating on autopilot for so long, anger and determination my only real emotions, that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone genuinely care. I admitted I wasn't okay. Not really, but I would be. I just needed to finish what I'd started. That weekend was when things came to a head. Eden announced that her mother had found the perfect starter home for us and wanted to take us to see it Sunday. I agreed, then casually mentioned I had a surprise for her too, something I'd been working on. Eden's face did this strange thing where she tried to look excited but was clearly suspicious. She asked what kind of surprise. I just said it was something significant. Something I thought would really demonstrate how much our future together meant to me. The look that crossed her face, a mix of triumph and barely concealed disdain, told me everything. She thought I was talking about agreeing to the house her mother had selected. That I was finally falling in line with their plan. I suggested we make a day of it Sunday. See her mom's house pick in the morning, then I'd show her my surprise in the afternoon. She readily agreed, already texting her mother about the schedule change. That night I lay in bed next to a woman I now realized had never loved me and felt strangely calm. The Spite House was nearly complete. My lawyer had all the documentation he needed. I discreetly moved my important papers and family heirlooms to my parents' house over the past few weeks. Everything was in place. Sunday morning arrived, and I was ready to show them both exactly what happens when you underestimate the poor boy who thinks he can provide.